You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com. And if you want to make sure you get the podcast delivered to your inbox first, make sure to subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. We're also live every Thursday at 1:30, so make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine, and you'll get a notification so you can join us live. Ask questions, interact, mix it up, share recipes. Thanks, Larry, again, using that a lot. Anna, how you doing this week?
Doing fine, David. How are you?
I'm tired and punchy. Jeff?
Well, we're not used to the tired part, but we'll make do with the rest.
Yeah. I've been on the road a bit this week. I mean, you have too, Jeff, but you're just holding it better.
I didn't have to get on a plane though. So that's a big difference.
Just zaps it out of you.
Yeah.
I left it somewhere over the Midwest. All right. Well, before we get started, we have a word from our sponsor. Hi, I'm David Manti, and I want you to register now for a new video podcast on how manufacturers are using augmented reality. Joining me is Mike Bradford, and he's going to talk about how, if anything, augmented reality makes manufacturers seem more tech-savvy. How's that working, Mike?
The image of manufacturing quite often, particularly in younger employees, is just, it's not cool, it's dirty, it's whatever. With the use of HoloLens or other technologies to do augmented reality, all of a sudden this is new technology. It's fun to use, it's exciting, it's interesting, and it gives manufacturers a much more tech-savvy and interesting image, particularly for younger workers.
And we're back. And I understand if that was a little odd because it's me throwing it to an ad that I'm talking about. So I apologize, especially if it's a little weird on screen. I'm sure I'm wearing the same thing, though. Our sponsor is Dassault Systems this week, a new webinar on how augmented reality is being used in manufacturing. And I got to say, the discussion kind of blew my mind a little bit because we're talking about how it's being used in quality and assembly. We're talking about like projecting images onto aircraft in terms of maintenance. I mean, I've typically thought of it in terms of using like Google goggles or whatever, but it's they're doing way different things from that. It's also a really interesting way to attract new talent because we talk a lot about on the podcast about how manufacturing is seen as kind of like maybe behind the times a little bit when it comes to being tech savvy. And man, if you watch some of this footage from the live video podcast, it will blow your mind. Join us December 8th at 1 p.m. for the live video podcast. Hope to see you there. All right, let's jump into our first story this week. Ammunition maker to invest $60 million in Georgia plant, hiring 600. Italian company Norma Precision plans to invest $60 million in Garden City, Georgia, to build an ammunition plant. The factory will manufacture and distribute ammunition and hire 600 people. In July, Beretta, which is also based in Italy, bought Norma Precision and other ammunition makers from RUAG International for an undisclosed price. Norma is also moving its headquarters to the site, and the company's 88 current employees in Georgia are going to be offered transfers. Employees will make an average of $57,000 a year. Last year, Norma Precision imported more than 400 containers of ammunition from European factories and delivered more than 30 million cartridges of ammo made in the USA. The company hopes to export U.S.-made ammo as well. The company will qualify for up to $10.5 million in state tax credits over 5 years. The county is also chipping in a bit to provide a 10-year property tax break worth about $2.7 million. Jeff, I feel like the company looks at importing 400 containers of ammunition, looks at the escalating costs of shipping, and it's a pretty easy equation to move to the southeast.
I think it's interesting for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it's interesting within the state of Georgia here, we're seeing some different dynamics. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago in terms of the Hyundai plant was really embraced in this area. The Rivian plant up in Atlanta is still going under still a lot of scrutiny in terms of the tax breaks and incentives to potentially get that plant in place. And again, here in this part of the state, seem much more receptive to it. I also think it's very interesting when you look at Beretta. Beretta has a really unique position within this marketplace. It's a more expensive. They're primarily known for their pistols and their 9mm, but they do have a full extent of firearms. But again, they're typically more expensive. And whether it's for that reason or others, it hasn't always been real popular in the U.S. There are others that have definitely, Glock is definitely beating it. Beretta also lost their contract with the U.S. Army. They're starting to phase out the Berettas starting last summer. So, and there is sort of I guess there's something with that brand. People don't think it's as powerful a weapon. I don't know what the deal is between the U.S. commercial buyer of pistols. They're just not receptive to the Berettas they are in other brands. So I think this is an interesting move from that perspective as well. Norma Precision is a higher quality ammunition. It's more expensive as well. So for Beretta to align itself with that brand also makes sense. But this could be an opportunity for them not just to get into the ammo market, but hopefully give them a bigger presence within the U.S. so they can grab a hold of that marketplace as well. More pistols are sold in the U.S. than any place in the world. So it makes sense for a lot of reasons from a market perspective as well. I also have some personal stories with the Beretta, but I'll let Anna talk about her stuff first.
So isn't part of the RUAG international acquisition to kind of get away from that Beretta name in the U.S. market?
I think it depends. I think what it really comes down to is getting away from some of that stigma again. If you are in the Army or the law enforcement, that's typically where the Beretta was used because it is more expensive, but it's also very reliable. It is potentially a higher quality weapon, but you're paying more for it. Yeah. So if they can establish themselves, yes, it is more, but it's worth more because of these reasons, and get away from some of those other, whether they're true or false or
like
those other dynamics that are associated with the brand, but being closer to a buying public could help them.
Anna, this part of the nation has been a hotbed for, what is it? Is it Governor Bashir? Is that the governor?
No, you're...
Oh, I'm thinking of Kentucky.
Yep.
Well, the governor's been...
whatever his name is.
Yeah. The Georgia governor has been putting out quite a lot of releases for new manufacturing facilities coming to the state.
I think his name is.
Yes.
Okay. Not enough for me to remember it off the top of my head. Apparently there's more in Kentucky. But either way, it's been very competitive there. Do you see potential oversaturation of the market when it comes to manufacturers coming to this part of the country and looking for labor?
I don't know if I would call it oversaturation necessarily. That sounds like an anti-jobs thing to say.
I'm trying to bait you into your anti-jobs platform. Just like, enough already.
Not going to happen, David. Jeff mentioned Hyundai, which is a company that's also setting up a massive factory in the same county that Beretta will be building their plant. I think anytime you see big plants cluster in the same area, there are benefits for the workforce because obviously Hyundai's big EV plant is going to be competing for that same labor pool. Hyundai's plans are massive. It's a $5.5 billion plant. They plan to hire 8,100 workers. So I think neither company can really afford to approach recruiting from a lowball vantage point. I think they, at a minimum, are going to need to be competitive with each other. Just how competitive? Well, Georgia's unemployment rate is at 2.9%, but in Bryan County, it's 2.2%, which is right. I know that's crazy. Like that's quite a bit lower even than the national unemployment rate, which is at historic lows. So I feel like it's a bit of a tall order. I know that this stuff doesn't last forever, but with Hyundai coming in and hoping to be operational by 2025, Beretta should be able to kind of sneak in before that. They have a much smaller scale project. And scoop up some of those workers before they're head-to-head with Hyundai. But even with that, I still think it's going to be a challenge to fill these vacancies, even the 600 that Beretta's looking at in the near term.
So you're not anti-job, you're anti-job vacancy.
I
was
trying to connect those dots too. I wasn't sure. Okay.
I think it's going to be hard.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
2.2%, that's crazy.
No, there's not a lot of labor out there. In a more competitive manufacturing labor market, I think you make a really good point about possibly being able to get in there earlier, and they don't have nearly the demands that Hyundai has in terms of scale. I just wanted to go through the timeline a little bit. So Beretta announced plans to acquire RUAG Ammotech, which included Norma, in March 2022. In April of this year, Norma Precision announced plans to set up shop in Chatham County, which is about 24 miles east of Bryan County. The company was going to put its headquarters, manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution in Chatham County, and hired some 88 workers, which we mentioned previously. The deal with Beretta closed in July 2022, and now everything moves to Bryan County, and as well as the 88 workers, which have the ability to transfer. And I mean, it seems at least like that's possibly a realistic transfer, although a much longer commute day to day. Did you guys look into that at all? What do you think happened? Could it just be, the relationship with Beretta? But it kind of confused me that they were all set to set up shop in Chatham County, which is closer to Savannah, and then all of a sudden, a few months later, decide to move, 30 minutes west.
I'm going to guess it just had to do with the capabilities of the facility that they were in versus what they're going to need. I mean, these are some huge quantities that they're going to be pumping out here, with 600 new employees potentially needed or desired long term. But
that was the other thing, is they're moving further away from a major city into a county that is actually has better unemployment rates. So from that perspective, that's why I was kind of confused also.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of cash-in working at this type of facility, in certain areas. I think working at an ammo factory might be really cool and appeal to a larger number of people in some areas. This might be one of them. The one thing I thought was kind of interesting here too, in just comparing some of these different tax benefit structures that we're seeing, they're capping this at $10.5 million over 5 years in terms of tax breaks per jobs for the jobs that are created. But they're also at $3,500 per job. Now, if you do that for 600 jobs, they're basically capping it at 50% during that time, which is really smart by that local municipality in terms of how they're approaching that. So they are saying, we do want to reimburse you, but in case they don't get there, again, kind of using the Foxconn reference, they're protecting themselves. So hopefully this is also sort of maybe a case study for how municipalities can be smarter in setting up these types of incentives to lure the manufacturer without putting themselves too far out on a ledge.
Last year, Remington Firearms announced that it was moving from New York to LaGrange, Georgia, into a $100 million factory and R&D campus that's going to create 856 jobs over 5 years. So gun and ammunition manufacturers are leaving the U.S. Northeast as they've become, certain parts of the nation have become critical of gun making. The South and West have both been much more welcoming, and I find it interesting to see how the scale of operations. And I don't know, do you think that maybe some of these cities that sort of push these manufacturers out might, have some regrets in terms of what they let go?
I don't know if you could necessarily always blame the municipality for that shift. I mean, if there's a problem with workforce, which there is nationwide, and you have a local population that in some cases or many cases are ideologically opposed to that, then it's going to be that much harder for you to get those workers in the door. It's not like, it's hard enough when you produce a non-controversial product. But this obviously is just sort of loaded and no pun intended, but
strong pun either way.
Sorry. But obviously that's going to cause some people to pull back. And I don't think that they can necessarily afford to be in an area where maybe half the eligible workforce will agree to even take an interview or whatever. That's a challenge. It is.
No, and we've talked about it several times on the podcast where workers more now than ever, it seems, want to align ideologically with the company they work for. It just makes it easier to get up for work every day.
Well, I think on a more pragmatic perspective too, it's saying that employees are going to make an average of about $57,000 a year. I think that means something different in upstate New York opposed to Southern Georgia. So,
all right. Our next most popular story. Before we get to it, Jesse, who's watching us live again. Hi, Jesse. How's it going? She says, "Happy Friday, team."
Thanks, Jess.
Jesse.
Thanks, Jesse.
We're live on Thursdays.
I just got in. I apologize.
Every Thursday.
I drove through the snow. No, okay. All right, our next most popular story. Alien metal could curb need for vital materials. And by materials, I mean minerals. Researchers at a pair of universities may have discovered a potential solution to our rare earth metal problem. They're making a, quote, alien material that doesn't exist anywhere on Earth. Naturally, anyways. Engineers at Northeastern University in Boston and Cambridge University in the UK have created tetratanite, a compound tough enough to withstand extreme pressures and temperatures as a permanent magnet in advanced electronic systems. Until now, tetratanite, an iron-nickel alloy, was only found in deposits where meteorites crashed into Earth. Further tests are needed to make sure synthetic tetratanite will match its alien predecessor, but if all goes well, it could be in new products in 5 years. The world is in a race against time for these materials. Anna, that's how Andy Zell put it, who wrote this story. It was just like, I mean, it's dramatic, but it's also true. We are in a desperate need for these materials now, and this seems like at least a potential solution to a shortage.
Yeah, I love a good race against time. It's my favorite races to watch.
As long as it doesn't go back in time.
Right.
That you don't believe in.
I do not.
Time travel is garbage.
I'm categorically opposed to time travel.
For another day.
Yeah, I thought this story was very interesting. We were discussing this not very long ago when Jeff brought up this story in his In Case You Missed It segment on that controversial proposal about potentially mining the seafloor for rare earths. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we were talking about some of the emerging lab developments that were taking place where researchers were actually trying to recreate some of these. So I was pretty excited to see the story, just like right on the heels of that conversation that we had. But I think for one reason, it's because it really offers a prospect of the U.S. being able to innovate its way out of supply chain issues with China. As we move into mass production and adoption of EVs, we know we have a problem there. Mm-hmm. And maybe innovation is going to be able to solve that in some ways. The CHIPS and Science Act that was passed this year largely addresses some of these opportunities. And while the CHIPS part, I think, got the most attention, it also does provide billions in funding for critical components as it relates to automobiles, energy efficiency. It really hopes to bolster like R&D and new tech development with public-private partnerships, funding, all of that stuff. So I do hope that the CHIPS and Science Act can and will bring more of this stuff into the mix. And not only will it accelerate our goals around energy efficiency and decarbonization, but also enable the U.S. to kind of break some of these long supply chains and function independently of China, because it really has the opportunity to help with that right now.
Right. Jeff, what are your thoughts on what in Cambridge they're calling the cosmic magnet?
I think it's phenomenal. I think this could be a huge development in terms of what we want to do for electric vehicles and all those materials that we need. But it says they're like 5 to 8 years away from this really becoming commercially viable. So it puts the conversation back on all the stuff Anna was just talking about. And just to sort of reinforce that, when we look at these rare earths, we're talking about 5 basic materials, okay? Graphite. Do you know how many graphite mines or production facilities we have in the U.S.?
7.
0.
Oh, damn.
7.
How about lithium? How many mines do we have?
I'm going to go with 0. I feel like that's safer.
1.
Damn.
7.
Okay, how about cobalt?
That seems like a 4 stronger.
1,
Jeff.
and it just started a couple months ago.
Do you want to continue to humiliate us, or do you just want to tell us the number of mines?
So basically, we have 1 lithium mine, we have 1 nickel mine, we have 1 cobalt mine, we have 0 graphite mines. We do have 23 copper mines, however. So we have an issue here, right? So, and I know that's obviously well known, but what it really kind of brings the conversation back to is, what do we do until then? Until this type of materials, what are we going to do? And where do we invest? Do we invest in renewable energy sources? Do we invest in continuing to push forward with lithium ion and try to be smarter with the way we mine? Where does it all go? Because even if you try to take out the biggest contributor to all of the emissions and the environmental concerns about mining, which is the equipment and everything that it brings to the equation, you still at some point need a power source for that equipment to extract these minerals from the earth. So that's where the conversation needs to start. And it just puts us in this weird edge between, are we looking long-term and understanding in the short term we do have to mine and get these materials? Do we look to the lab to continue to develop this stuff? We've been talking about hydrogen lately. The last couple conferences that I've been at, hydrogen has been a huge source in terms of an alternative energy option. We've also talked about sodium batteries and the fact that they could be a huge solution because there is no emissions. There is no rare earths, but we don't have the research involved that allows them to be dense enough to store enough energy to power a vehicle for any length of time. So it puts us in this weird spot of where do we invest? Do we continue to sort of suck it up and mine these minerals that we need in order to be competitive on a global perspective and stop sourcing from China and kind of swallow some of the environmental impacts? Or do we look more to the lab? Where do we go, I guess? I'm kind of asking you guys because it just seems like it's a double-edged sword.
I think it's a mix because with developments like this, it's easier to stomach, maybe careful mining in the interim, careful calculated mining in the interim, in the event that, developments like this are truly, let's say, 5 years away, and we could maybe help our supply chain problems with being minimally invasive to the environment without because it's one thing to kind of say you're going to dedicate yourself to decades of mining, which might have irreversible effects. But if you say, okay, here's where we're going. Right now, it's 5 years out. If we really invest in it, maybe we can cut that timeline a little bit, the time to market. But maybe that helps people stomach the chances that you take with mining for some of these materials. I don't know. I think it could be a good mix. Anna?
I mean, yeah, I think easier said than done to try to get a community to believe you when you say this is a 5-year mine. But I also, I also would say that 5 years feels like a long time. In many ways it is. But if you look at where automakers are in terms of where they think they're going to be at max capacity for their EVs, everyone is doing a fairly slow rollout, save for a couple of automakers. So 5 years from now, 2027, if that's a reality, I mean, we're not going to be at mass production exactly of EVs by every automaker by then. I mean, people are saying we'll have half our fleet in 15 years will be, you know what I mean? There's a lot of slow roll on that. So I don't know. I think that 5 years will come quicker than you think. I would hate to discourage this type of innovation that's got maybe a long-term solution to this. But I agree with you. I mean, it's happening now, so we do have to figure out what to do now.
Well, and I think with EVs, we're focused on batteries right now in a lot of these conversations, but I think we do need to take a step back when it comes to that initial source of energy throughout our grid. Eventually, we're going to want to plug all these batteries into something, right? Mm-hmm. That's where I think we need to start looking more at renewable energy. If we're going to be committed to our transportation being primarily focused on non-diesel or non-fossil fuels, we need to go right to the source.
Well, and the federal government has invested a lot in, the Biden administration has made a pledge to get the grid solar in, I don't know, it's to 50% or something in the next couple of years. I mean, there's a lot going on behind the scenes and funding there. So I do think that is in the works. And I agree with you because you can't just say we're going to plug in every car and fire it with coal. I mean, that doesn't.
And that's where I'm equally impressed, but also frustrated because we're going in 3 or 4 different directions here. We need to pick one and stick to it and put more funds into what we want to do to actually get something so it's a pure solution, not sort of kind of maybe an answer at some point.
I don't know. Our history in picking one solution and going with it hasn't had a great track record. So I think maybe having the,
So you want to hedge your bets?
I do. I mean, having come from Vegas, I could have hedged a few more bets and been in a better place right now. John Dearden, he says new technology batteries are not using those materials. So, John, if you're watching live, I ask you, is it not even worth us to be pursuing this type of thing? Because within 5 years, these materials are going to be obsolete in new technologies, batteries? Because then, really cool stories like this are just, very cool, but, not going to make a big difference. So they tried to previously recreate tetratenite, and natural tetratenite is actually pretty incredible because it takes millions of years to develop naturally in meteorites. So, when we're talking about a rare earth metal, it's not even it's a rare off earth mineral. And when they tried to previously recreate it, researchers used extreme impractical methods. One thing about this new patent pending method is that they say it could be produced at scale, which, it could help take some of that, 81% of the rare earth market share away from China. Okay, our next most popular story, but John, get back to us and we'll totally cover that. Magnet maker arrested for sending DoD drawings in China. From December 2018 to January 2020, Phil and Monica Pascoe and Scott Tubbs sent 70 technical drawings to a Chinese company without a license from the U.S. government, violating the Arms Export Control Act and international traffic in arms regulations. The schematics, which were owned by 2 other U.S. companies, were related to end-use items for aviation, submarines, radar, tanks, missiles, mortars, and other systems. Phil Pascoe is the president of Quadrant Magnetics, a magnetic products company also charged in the indictment for importing rare earth magnets smelted and magnetized in China. Quadrant sold the magnets to U.S. companies that used them in components that wound up in F-16s, F-18s, and other defense assets. That scheme violated the Defense Acquisition Regulation System's Specialty Metal Clause, which says rare earth magnets sold to the DoD must be produced and magnetized in the U.S. or an approved country. China, not approved. The Pascoes and Tubbs face many years in prison. Now, in January, Quadrant Magnetics was a Kentucky darling that announced plans to build a new rare earth magnet manufacturing facility in Louisville. The development was valued at $95 million and aimed to create 200 new jobs with some $3.4 million in tax incentives. Now, in response to this story that we wrote, a company spokesperson reached out, and their quote was, "The company is cooperating with the government regarding the recent indictment from the Western District of Kentucky. We will continue to do so, and we remain focused on our mission to serving as an important partner to our customers." Jeff, what were your thoughts on what Quadrant Magnetics was doing? And do you think that part of this new manufacturing facility was them understanding that it wasn't sustainable the way where they were doing it and trying to maybe get,
I don't know. This is a unique company because they were founded out in Silicon Valley and they've gradually expanded their enterprise. I mean, they've had manufacturing in China for 12 years. Okay. And if you look at their website again, according to them, they have over 5,000 employees. And I bring that up because typically when we see this kind of story, it's an engineer at this company or a product development specialist within this company. This was the guy. This was the president of the company who was involved in this. So you're trying to understand, were they just naive and not understanding the regulations they needed to follow? Or were they just extremely lazy? Because to get caught doing this stuff, I mean, they were using other companies' intelligence, essentially, their proprietary information to try to close these deals. The other thing is they had the magnets magnetized by another company before selling them. That's one of the services they tout on their website. So again, there's just a lot of things that just do not align here. It makes it really hard to understand. The other thing is when you look at the Arms Export Control Act and the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, they're very simple. They are very straightforward in terms of what you can and cannot do when you are dealing with the Department of Defense or anything involved in something that could be used by anyone in the Department of Defense. The catch-all is check with us first.
Right.
So why they went this route, especially for a company that's been around for roughly 40 years, 30 years, it's hard to understand. I just don't get it. I don't know if they were falling on some tougher times. Maybe they grew too fast, expanded too quickly, started taking some shortcuts. Maybe they were talking to some people at their Chinese factory who, I don't know, thought they had a way around this, but it's really hard to understand. The one takeaway maybe in working, if you are part of the supply chain and working with some of these companies, make sure they are ITAR compliant, because that is something that they should be touting. Not a surprise, I couldn't find anything of that on this company's website, on Quadrant's website. So something to look for.
And after looking at this story, what did you think about the scheme, and not just because it was kind of a weird two-parter where they not only sent this proprietary information overseas, but they also had the illegal components scheme going as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me. So you read their statement right before you went to Jeff, and I guess I was surprised that the statement they submitted was so generic.
Yeah.
Like they did not take that opportunity to provide any context, no baseline defense whatsoever. Like normally you see somebody at least express a position, but they're like, we are cooperating. The end.
That's their position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are like, okay. Well,
Yeah, like something wasn't
do
clear.
it?
We were lied to. These people were not straightforward with us. Something, right?
Exactly. I mean, usually there's some sort of defense included. So did they not have one at all?
No, their immediate response was, be cool, man.
Yeah.
We're going to be cool. You be cool.
We got it. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just especially, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, especially like the political climate during this time, 2018 to 2020, anything going to or from China, you know that was going to be looked at more closely.
Heavily scrutinized. Yeah.
So for them to, again, I don't know if they just really just kept their head in the sand or they were just super lazy and not even trying to cover it up, it seemed like. I mean, I don't know. Weird.
Maybe it could have been a supplier, like, or a manufacturing partner that maybe they were led astray. I don't know. I'm grasping.
That's what you're doing because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, like you let your Chinese manufacturing partner tell you that you're ITAR compliant.
No. I was.
fine.
I meant like if you had another U.S. subcontractor or a contract manufacturer that you were working with and they were farming out the work.
Maybe. Tell me that in your statement.
Yeah.
I would like to know that.
Throw some people under the bus. That's what we're used to here.
The bus is here.
I mean, we already know that at least 3 individuals under the bus right now.
That's true.
Well, and I liked how it was described too. Like they're going for a lot of years. Like not even like a certain amount, just a lot.
Yeah. Well, it was like, it's one of those where you start looking each individual charge. And I mean, I understand that all of these wind up typically in a settlement or a plea deal, but you look at each individual charge, how many counts, what each could max out at, and you're like, okay, it's just a lot. It's a lot. You know?
Too much to count.
Well, and to your point too, but looking at the new facility there, and I know this is obvious, but it's not just these 3 people who screwed up. I mean, look what they're costing this company, the development there for building that new facility, the new employees, all that stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, so Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, he's Kentucky's governor.
There it is. He's not the one in Georgia.
Nope. So his team is said to be now actively reviewing these allegations and stressed that the performance-based incentives that they had offered were just that, performance-based. So there was no upfront money exchanged at this point. They're clear about that. It's just funny to me that we're discussing this company, just following up on the alien metals story, because this company called itself a, quote, blueprint for a revitalization of rare earth manufacturing and research and development in the U.S. when it was, working through this this deal with Kentucky. And they seem to be getting things from China and then lying about it, which is like
fibbing.
I mean, because it's almost impossible to believe, to Jeff's point, that that they didn't know the rules about what they were doing. And if you look at the rhetoric that they were employing when courting public dollars for their expansion, it's just really disappointing.
Yeah. Well, no, that was that's part of what made me think that they knew what they were doing, and this entire development in Kentucky was kind of trying to make it right, like do it the right way in America. No, because
maybe.
because we kind of talk about companies sort of like faking it till you make it, and so maybe they just like we're right at the end of the faking it, and we're just about to start making it in the U.S. Because so at the time, Pasco said he wanted to bring magnetics manufacturing back to the U.S. His quote was, "It's time to get America in the magnet game." So I mean that could have been all bluster, but it seemed like they were trying to set up the U.S. manufacturing. Maybe this was a bridge. Maybe it was a bridge and they just got called on it.
Guys, we really got to figure out as a magnet company how to magnetize things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be the first thing, maybe.
Maybe.
All right. Okay. So John Dearden got back to us. Thank you for the follow-up, John. He knows something about silicon replacement for graphite. Oh, so maybe graphite won't even be a part of the equation. So it's just the 4 other ones then.
Well, and then what I understand, and John I know from our conversations back and forth, he's much more educated on this topic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think they still just struggle with the density. That's where the lithium ion battery comes into place. It can hold a charge. Those 300-mile between charge dynamics, that's where the lithium ion comes in. Nothing else is close to that right now.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. We appreciate the support. Our next most popular story. What do you think of this one? How an engineer turned his car into a motorcycle to save his life. And now for something completely different, and about 30 years in the making. In 1993, French engineer Émile Loray was driving through the Moroccan desert when his Citroën 2CV struck a rock, totaled the front axle, and ruined the chassis. He was 20 miles away from the closest town, and he had enough food and water to last about 10 days. So he did what any engineer would do. He chopped his wrecked car into a motorcycle using duct tape and hand tools. First, he removed the car's body to create a shelter for himself. Then he spent the next 12 days living in the car body, cobbling together a makeshift motorcycle using a hacksaw, a few screwdrivers, a hammer, pliers, and some wrenches, and aforementioned tape. He shortened the car's frame and fixed the axles. He put the engine on the front of the frame, made a seat, and attached the ignition to the makeshift handlebar. He even put a suspension on the back tire. It worked, and Loray drove himself out of the desert and into the hands of local authorities who weren't so welcoming. Instead of a hero's welcome, they fined him for using a vehicle that didn't match the registration. He rode his bike home back to France, and Anna, what I find incredible is that it still works today. Now, was this entirely a publicity stunt?
Why are we saying that it saved his life? I feel like walking to the nearby town would have also saved his life. He had 10 days worth of food and 20 miles to walk. That's
a number of people mentioned that on the website. Running the numbers like, hey, we think he could have made it. But instead he wanted to peel apart his car and live essentially in a G-string for 12 days building a motorcycle.
He also had a camera to take pictures, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
He only had a few essential supplies. He did not pack clothes.
It was a fascinating human interest story that to me was a bit overshadowed by the suggestion that he could not have survived until he did this.
Yeah.
In fact, you could argue that maybe the only time his life was in danger when he depleted all of his resources, spending 12 unnecessary days in the desert. But that's just me.
Days 11 and 12, we got really hairy.
Yeah.
And he was just like, okay, this really better work.
Right. Like then maybe he dies. I don't know. If it were me, I would have been long gone. But having said all that, it is a pretty cool project and super badass if irresponsible choice.
Yeah. It's a real Mad Max feel to that bike.
Definitely. Also a good reminder, I thought, as we push this idea of like a maker culture and tinkering and STEAM learning, all these buzzwords, but with very real applications. You think about how, you'd survive if you needed food or water or shelter or something. But, you're pretty likely to have your car break down at some point or encounter some need to like patchwork something in order to get to a safe place. I mean, I can't count how many times my husband has had to like creatively solve a household problem or rig something using skills that I just don't have.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good reinforcement that those basic mechanical skills are beneficial for things outside of just potential careers. And another reason that I think we need to support those kind of finding their place into high schools so kids can learn about working with their hands, Yeah. I don't think this was necessary, but it was interesting.
No, that's a really good point about how those are essential life skills that just, are maybe overlooked. I know I overlooked them. I took one woods class and it's helped me like a handful of times.
I'm sure.
Whereas Western Civ hasn't helped me too much. Maybe could have taken that. Yeah.
That thing.
Maybe gone to medals once or twice. Jeff, could you take your current car and in a matter of 12 days turn it into a motorcycle?
No. I don't think any of us, with just the tools we have right now, could even disassemble our vehicles to that point.
I could get a tire off and like maybe put like a stick in between each hole of the tire and like rock myself.
I can't even vacuum it with the tools I have now. So
I don't think, like I said, just the difference. This is a 93, so his vehicle's even older than that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a point where you could do some of this stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think you could even try now. But anyway, I got hung up on the same thing. Like 20 miles, man, just hump it,
Yeah.
But the one thing's giving, a couple things taking into consideration. Trying to walk that far or that long without shade would have been dangerous. I would agree. it still would have been my first thought. I think this shows how some people are definitely wired differently in terms of their perspective on it. He was also very familiar with this area. He had been there numerous times before. So people trying to defend him did say some things about the terrain. Yeah. Like if he would have like turned an ankle or something, like maybe he'd be done. Yeah, I would still circle back to probably walking out.
Well, but you raised a really good point, because that's what I thought about, was that he's an engineer, right? And so it made a lot of sense to me when I was like, no, he did what any engineer in that situation would do, and he over-engineered a solution. I mean, okay, not any of them, but like I think that engineers like a challenge, and it just reminds me of how different the personalities in my family are. You know, my dad's an engineer, and he's almost like thirsts for the moment something breaks and he's got to figure out a solution. Whereas I'm just like, and I thirst for the, you know, hopefully having the number in my phone so I can call them first. Just like, so I think, I don't know, I think there's something to that. You know, maybe not to the point of risking your life in the desert, but
I think he also has an affinity for these Citrons.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You're going to talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, okay, so he loves this 2CV, and he's made a number of things out of 2CVs. He's made goggles out of the rubber from the seat. He's made a table saw, a rugby ball out of the car. He's even made a boat. And so far, his one regret is that he hasn't made a plane using a Citroen 2CV yet. So
to come.
You know the email, Emil. Send it over. No, so but I mean, Jeff, that's another thing to be said about like really having a good understanding. Like, I mean, he knew this car hands down. And so like, he knew he could do that.
Yeah. I mean, it is an impressive feat. Again,
just not buying it.
I would have taken a different approach. But hey, it worked for him, and good for him.
You're the cop that he rolled up to, and you're just like,
I think that's hilarious. Right. That he got fined 450 euros.
Yeah, just like,
you got a permit?
Sure. He's like,
who is this scroungy looking guy trying to come into my town?
Yeah, look at this homeless man on his soda box or his box car.
Was he still wearing the like bikini briefs that he's wearing in all the photos?
I mean, he had to stay cool somehow,
I guess.
Yeah, I bet that tan was banging afterwards, though. All right. Crispy. He was a crispy man. Yeah. All right. Our most popular story this week: world's largest plane to be rebuilt. The Antonov AN-225 was destroyed during Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The plane, nicknamed Maria, Ukrainian for dream, was attacked by Russian forces in February. The plane was completely destroyed. The state defense company that manages the craft initially estimated repairs to cost $3 billion, and that it would make every effort to ensure Russia covered the costs. Now, the company is saying that it's going to take $502 million to fix Maria, and design work has already begun on the rebuild. The company already has many of the components it will need to rebuild the plane, which is 276 feet long and weighs about 628,000 pounds. The Antonov AN-225 was built in the 1980s and holds the record for heaviest aircraft ever built and longest wingspan of any operational craft. Jeff, when I saw the photos of this thing being rebuilt, was not one of the things that I thought was going to be considered.
No, it was pretty incredible when he shot. Because they basically knocked out the hangar, everything collapsed on the plane. It was pretty crazy. So you did a nice job sidestepping the name of this state defense contractor, which would be the equivalent of like a Lockheed Martin or a Raytheon or whatever. So Ukroboronprom?
Yeah.
Ukroboronprom?
Got to be it.
Let's go with that. On their website, just to kind of offer some context and what this plane means to Ukraine, they said on their site, having set over 240 unbroken world records, the AN-225 Mira was more than just a plane. It was and is a symbol of our people, which is why it deserves to be rebuilt. So there is that sense of pride, which right now with everything that's going on over there and what everybody is dealing with, you can appreciate why it would be so important to at least come out with a statement like this. The other side of that is $500 million right now. When you look at what this company does in terms of military contractor, they provide armored vehicles, they provide missile defense, which is in the news right now. There may be some more immediate needs. So what the timeline is on rebuilding the Mira will be very interesting. Because like I said, I think there's other needs right now too.
No, one of the things that I thought immediately about the discrepancy in terms of the 3 billion versus the 502 million, it was reminiscent of they're going to build the wall. You know, it's like, no, it's going to cost 3 billion. It's going to cost 3 billion to rebuild it, and we're going to make sure that Russia pays for it. And then when they, you know, kind of looked back and realized they could do it for 502 million, you know, maybe it seemed a little bit more realistic, and it was something that they needed to do for a point of national pride.
Yeah, I mean, they're still saying that they're going to try to make Russia pay for it. I don't see how that happens. 500 million seems like a low number when you look at the destruction that took place. You know, it's sort of strange to reconcile that $3 billion initial number, and now it's reduced to that extent. I know they said that they have, 30% of the components needed, but that doesn't do it. I mean, to reduce it that much, right? That's so I don't know. To me, it seems like one of those projects that could easily balloon both from a cost and timeline perspective. And to Jeff's point, you know, you can respect the idea of what rebuilding it means symbolically. And yet there's a lot of arguably more critical infrastructure that needs rebuilding in Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot of things that $500 million could go towards. I just, like, how much money would they be willing to put into this just to, like, prove their resilience when I think their resilience is on full display already? I mean, their own people see it. Russia sees it. Frankly, the entire world sees it, you know? And since they won't say how this is being financed or where it's going to be rebuilt, I just kind of wonder if this is getting backburnered while the dust settles. Again, I don't see how they get Russia to pay for it. That's not happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they came out, they said that it was essentially going to be like the design work is happening, but it's going to be backburnered until the conflict's over. And
I just think, and maybe backburnered is the wrong word for what I think the reality is, which is maybe they're pushing it to the end of the line. But they don't want to say that now, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I think we all want to see this plane rebuilt. I just don't know how practical that is in the near term.
So when it was destroyed, the manufacturers at Yukoboronprom said, quote, "The dream will never die." One interesting thing that I found was a Ukrainian startup called Metal Time. Right now, they have a campaign on Indiegogo, and they're selling working mechanical design kits of the AN-225. They each cost about $99, and all the profits from these kits go to Antonov and to fund the Maria rebuild, as well as help finding new homes for the Antonov employees and training new Ukrainian pilots and aviation engineers. I know that I had mentioned it previously, but when the conflict started and as it's gone on, you know, sometimes people struggle as to what they could do to potentially help. You know, this is something where you could potentially get something leading up to the holiday season, and maybe it could go to do a little bit of good. Right now, the current campaign has raised $126,000, almost $127,000. But there are still more kits, and they look really cool. So you can have your own Maria at home, and hopefully it doesn't look it's not as sharp as it looks. It's a metal model. All right. Well, before we move on to, in case you missed it, we have another word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and I want you to register now for a new video podcast on how manufacturers are using augmented reality. Joining me is Mike Bradford, and he's going to talk about how, if anything, augmented reality makes manufacturers seem more tech-savvy. How's that working, Mike?
The image of manufacturing quite often, particularly in younger employees, is just, it's not cool, it's dirty, it's whatever. With the use of HoloLens or other technologies to do augmented reality, all of a sudden this is new technology. It's fun to use, it's exciting, it's interesting, and it gives manufacturers a much more tech-savvy and interesting image, particularly for younger workers.
And we're back. Although, did I really go anywhere? Because I was still there. Another word from our sponsor, Dassault Systems. Please join us December 8th at 1 p.m. on a new webinar on how manufacturers are right now using augmented reality. When I saw the clips of how manufacturers are currently using it, it looked too futuristic for me to wrap my head around. But the guy who joins me, Mike Bradford, does a great job explaining how manufacturers are using it for quality and assembly. Also, a huge attraction for new talent. We often hear about how manufacturers and companies are trying to gamify things, the gamification of the industry. And this is the closest thing that I've seen to it in a practical way that actually saves time and money. So
when we've been getting back on the road, going to trade shows, this augmented reality stuff, this isn't a gonna be anymore. This is a here, it's now, and these are applicable tools that you can use just to make your day-to-day better.
Yeah, it is. It's just so it's cool how you can, hold the tablet up over whatever you're looking to service or just check on, and you're getting real-time stats on it. Well, let's jump into, in case you missed it, the stories that maybe weren't as popular this week, but still stand to make an impact on the industry going forward. Anna, what's your in case you missed it?
So the story I selected, the headline was Amazon debuts robot arm to streamline fulfillment process. And I know what you're thinking. Another robot from Amazon, but this one's interesting. So Amazon has millions of products, obviously, of all shapes and sizes in its inventory, and the company recognized the opportunity to invent new technology that could help them handle at basically Amazon scale, which is bigger than everyone's scale. It has introduced a robot called Sparrow. It's a robotic system that advances item handling in the company's operations. It's the first robotic system in Amazon's warehouses that can detect, select, and handle individual products in the company's inventory. It leverages computer vision, AI, machine learning. Sparrow can recognize and handle millions of different items. Amazon says that Sparrow would take on repetitive tasks, enabling Amazon's workers to focus on advancing safety and doing more value-added tasks. So I chose this story because, while it may seem ho-hum that Amazon has another robot to assist in its warehouse operations, this one's actually pretty revolutionary when you consider that previously there wasn't a system that could identify random packages in a pile that are completely different from one another. And this one uses machine learning to understand what it's seeing and where it needs to go. And then that robot arm with that gets smarter and smarter as it goes, kind of catalogs all that stuff.
Yep.
This is a role that for humans has a super high burnout rate. It's rife with ergonomic risk. It's not a value-added task. It's boring. Warehouse tech companies have been working for years on technology around package handling, pick and place, that kind of stuff. Specifically this task where there are haphazard piles of items with different shapes, sizes, requiring different grips because they're different, malleability. Is that?
Yeah. No, well, they have different, you mean like textures or?
Like the tactile element?
Yeah, okay.
Are you talking about the actual gripper or are you talking about the product?
So it's not something as easy as having a robot that can just pick up an item with, you don't know if it's going to be a soft item, box. Yeah, I mean, they're all in there, right? So those have been notoriously difficult to automate in the past. And as Wired points out in one of its follow-up articles on this, there's still plenty of work for humans to do. This is one of those things that Amazon's probably having a hard time staffing in this particular task and application. So it is a benefit, as automation goes, in my opinion.
It's a really cool benefit. It's a little difficult that it came out the same week that they said they were going to cut 10,000 jobs.
They're cutting corporate jobs, though. They're not cutting warehouse jobs. And I think that, the reason is that they need stuff like this.
Yeah.
No, I like it. I like these types of announcements or advancements because, again, it is taking something away that is difficult for humans to do. It also offers opportunities, and we talk about this a lot, and I know it can sound cliche because there are fewer manufacturing jobs potentially in some of these facilities where there is more automation and robotics, but it allows companies to focus on quality controls. And that's what Amazon needs badly right now. They need to focus on stuff so that they're not dealing with returns from damaged goods and other things of that nature. So using the robots to handle the packages, potentially or hopefully having more people in the warehouse to make sure things are going out to the right people, the right things are being shipped, all of that, more quality controls. I think this could help their business a great deal.
You know what job I want at Amazon? I want, after this robot fills my order, a human is tasked with looking what's in that box. And then they shoot me a text saying, "You share?"
I was going to say, you probably need that to after you place your order, you need somebody to call you and be like, "All right, David.
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah.
Do you really want 8 boxes of gummy worms?"
Yeah. I mean, no one needs 100 coin cells. No one's going to go through that many. And I'll just, it'll start a conversation with me and the, lovely customer service reps at Amazon.
100?
It was just you could buy 100 coin cell batteries for the same price as 24. It just made sense.
It didn't.
It didn't.
We have so many of those books where you flip the pages and they have the pictures
Yep.
that match with the sounds. They take 3 coin cells, and we run through a lot of those.
All right.
So far, I've used 9 out of the 100.
That's impressive. I don't think I've used 9 of those in a decade.
In your lifetime?
Yeah.
No, all joking aside, I really enjoy this type of automation equipment as well. And I would also stress, if you ever have an opportunity to see it at a trade show, IMTS is really good for seeing these types of machines in action. Go out and see them because they will blow your mind in terms of how they can pick and place disparate objects just using machine vision. And to your point, the machine learning mechanism of this, where they only get smarter over time, I think is very powerful as well. All right, Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
David, when I saw this story, I immediately thought of you.
Oh, no.
Now, granted, you have a Yaris, not a Prius. But
Yaris is holding up.
Yeah, the article I picked is Toyota shows their new Prius hybrid with more power, range, and style. So in the introductory paragraph is the new Toyota gas electric Prius hybrid not only comes with more power, acceleration, and driving range, it's also more stylish, scrapping the rather stodgy angular body for a sleek, futuristic look.
Sleek.
This is way more futuristic than the Yaris.
Here's the thing. I actually think it's a good looking vehicle. I
cool
do like the way this looks. I think they've made some really nice advancements. And it's not just that brought this to mind, but also the fact that we were just talking about rare earths and some of the issues in developing these purely electric vehicle batteries.
Yeah.
Toyota is just a stalwart with the hybrid model. They are not budging on this. And now when you look at some of these issues in terms of pacing to get to a fully electric vehicle, their model doesn't look terrible in terms of being more gradual. Now, they haven't even come out and said they're going fully electric at some point. So that is, you wonder what that'll do to them from a competitive perspective. But if they continue to make advancements, and again, they've improved everything here to the point where if you have a 10, 15 mile commute, I mean, you're not going to be using a whole lot of gas with this vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very impressive what they have done in terms of their hybrid. So it just gives that peace of mind then when you do go on those longer trips. You go down to Burlington, you're going up to the Green Bay area, Anna, I've got to go down to Eustis Ford. Those are trips where an electric vehicle range, getting there and back, you're kind of on the cusp with a lot of models right now. And that's where Toyota thinks they have a huge advantage. So the question to you guys is, do you like the way it looks? And is Toyota moving too slow, I guess?
I think I agree with you in terms of like the more metered pace. I have grown to, I've done a complete 180 on Toyota where I was very against the brand, didn't care for it. Never considered buying one until my wife had one, started driving it, and they are just the most reliable vehicles I've ever driven. From a design perspective, it almost, if you just showed me that photo, there's no way I'd say it was a Toyota. Because it seems like with the previous generation, they figured out the internals and then just kind of wrapped it with an almond. And then for the smaller one, they wrapped it with a blunt almond. Where this one, a little bit more industrial design. And no, I like it. And I mean, while the Yaris still has at least 40 to 60,000 miles on it, God willing. No, this would be something we would consider. Anna, what did you think about it?
First of all, I would like to say that it's very funny to me that knowing some of the cars that you've driven in your life that you were not buying what Toyota was selling.
That neon.
I was going to say.
It was American muscle.
All right.
Close the door, yeah. You definitely needed American muscle.
Yeah, no, I was.
Or to keep the door closed.
It was weirdly heavy for like such a small car. And I mean, I do have you're right. My track record is typically vehicles that are 10 to 20 years past their prime and, filled with parts from the junkyard. But the next one could be one of these.
I see you're making the slow turn. The last time I mentioned that I thought that the traditional Prius design was ugly, I got put on blast by somebody who listens to the podcast. I'm not saying that I'm anti-Prius. I'm not. I'm 100% not. It just, for a long time, they were really the only game in town for the hybrids, very high quality, highly efficient hybrids. So I was like, who cares? Now I think there's some pressure on them to compete a little bit more with some of the other EVs that are coming on the market. I do agree with you that they are behind on electrification. However, I don't think that metered approach was deliberate. I think they spent a lot of time putting their eggs in the hydrogen basket, and that maybe didn't pan out for them the way that they wanted to. So now I think maybe they're being forced to kind of pivot on that. And so we will see more from them. They do have one EV out now that's, I think they had to recall. They're still working through some kinks is my point, but they'll get there. They have a lot of intelligence on this electric vehicle design. I think that they will do fine.
Well, and also, personally, I trust the brand enough that when something like that comes out, like I would put faith in it, that it would be reliable. But I don't know. It was a surprise. If anything, it was a surprise.
The look of it surprised me a lot.
It looks nice, though. I agree with you. I like the way it looks.
All right. In case you missed it, this week is about a company that debuted a 3D printed bike EV hybrid-ish. This week, German innovation studio N Frontier unveiled a new concept vehicle at Form Next 2022. The fully functioning prototype is a hybrid between an electric cargo bike and a small EV.
Because that's what we needed.
Yeah.
We're looking to fill that sweet spot between those two.
That's right.
Bike car combo?
Yeah.
Boy, what can we do?
The Yulia leans heavily on 3D printing to create a new solution for last mile connectivity. The company used FDM technology from Stratasys to 3D print large body components. The process was cheaper than using traditional manufacturing like injection molding, and it was faster because N Frontier could make the parts in-house. The Yulia uses a chainless, pedal-operated electrical drivetrain and has a range that tops out around 44 miles, and a top speed of about 16 miles per hour, which, at least the distance, would suit the average American's commute. The four-wheeled hybrid is a two-seater with a cargo payload of a little more than 550 pounds. It's 7.5 feet long, 5.5 feet high, and a little less than 3 feet wide, and it only weighs 154 pounds. Technically, Yulia is a bike, so you're not going to need a driver's license to drive it, and it could be even driven in bike lanes, which to me seems unnecessary and a bit dangerous. Users can call the parked vehicle. Okay, this is what I like the most about this entire concept. Users can call the parked vehicle, and it will autonomously arrive in this come to me mode, which I think is, a very useful piece of technology that we could start seeing on automobiles very soon. It can also follow without a driver in a follow me mode. So N Frontier plans to launch production in 2024. I enjoyed the story for a couple of things. One was that follow me or the come to me mode, because we've seen that people have tried that in concept and they've actually accomplished it. Another was using 3D printing to create the body around it. One thing that I was a little concerned about is when you go putting bodies around things or frames around things, it kind of, I think, gives people this inherent sense of safety. Whereas, I don't know, I feel like if you get clipped driving this thing, it just sends millions of plastic shards at you. I was joking about how, no, it's kind of just like you're driving inside the pipe bomb. But no, that's too extreme though. I wouldn't say that though. I wouldn't say that. No. But I really like a lot of things about the Yulia. I like how they're using 3D printing for parts in terms of short run manufacturing. I also I don't know if I'm sold on the e-bike yet. Just because I feel like if I'm within biking distance, I'm gonna just pedal. But I don't know if that's going to change as I get older and the knees don't get easier, Jeff, did you have a chance to check out the Yulia?
I did, and I'm trying to think of an application for it to be positive.
Yeah,
I'm just
little grocery getter.
I don't know, man. You can only go 16 miles an hour, which is good. Quite honestly, you wouldn't want this thing going much faster because it does not look safe. I would not feel comfortable in this. I would agree with you though. The come to me mode and the follow me mode, there's something that can be built off of that technology. I do like that.
Yeah.
I mean, is this something you put on a big campus for people getting around or something? But It seems like we already have stuff for that.
We do, but one thing about this is it's enclosed, so maybe you could do it in the elements a little bit, you know, in the rain. I thought of it as, I try to think of applications where I take my bike to the grocery store, and like there are times like, you know, today when all of a sudden the plane lands and you're like, oh, it's 0 degrees in Wisconsin, you know, and then maybe instead of like getting the car fired up, I could take the electric bike, and if I was just, you know, doing a 2-bag load sort of thing.
Oh, so you would need you just want a roof for your bike?
I mean, well, I'm grasping, like, yeah, but I mean, no, you would want something that could maybe cut the wind, although in theory it's just going to become a big sail. You're going to be thrown around in this thing.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is, because I'm not buying into this one. Maybe somebody sees something I don't, but the fact that somebody had a vision, and the 3D printing technology allows for these visions to become a working prototype, a reality of sorts for them to see what they could put together. And it's a lower cost, more efficient way of doing it. I think without 3D printing, going through any type of fabrication or molding process, this probably doesn't happen.
It's not even, it doesn't exist. Also, I will say in terms of the design, I think it looks cool. They did a good job with like, they did a good job of like making it try to look futuristic. It looked like maybe something that would be like driven autonomously in like Total Recall.
It looks like a pedal car. I mean, that's what it is. It looks like your kid's pedal car. I mean, I don't know.
This is who was it that said paint it yellow and red and make it a little tykes, little tykes. Yeah. Anna, would you drive?
How many do you want? That's really the question.
Yeah, how many Yulias can we line up for you?
Well, everyone in my family already has their own rickshaw, and I think this is the next logical step to replacing those when they age out. No, I think it's been said. I don't think this is safe on the road. It's not going to be wanted in a bike lane. It's too big.
Yeah. People are already like. There's already a lot of anger with people that have electric bikes on bike paths anyways.
On the bike path. Yeah, there's so many.
already anger with this, and it's not even out yet.
I think they're actually prohibited in our city.
They are. That doesn't stop them.
No, of course not. But to my point, like this is not, where does this go? You know, it's not safe on the road. It only goes 16 miles an hour. And as you said, if somebody hit this thing, you're crushed. So
it would not go well.
There's not limited applications for it. Maybe like as a delivery vehicle in a very dense city setting. I don't know, but still, I don't think I would feel safe in it. Yeah,
they're targeting the German market first. I could see it something as like, sort of a touristy attraction where like you saw Segways back.
Segway tours?
Yeah, I mean, because it's a 2-seater, it could be fun, if not ridiculous, to have, 2 people in there just cruising around like the lake trail or something, going looking at Lake Michigan. Just like what just passed us?
You're trying.
That's a Yulia.
You're trying.
Nah, I know. It's I don't know. Sometimes I'm really impressed by innovation, and it's okay if sometimes that innovation also makes you laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get out of here.
I'm just picturing like the follow me mode. Like what, you have to go 16 also? Like
6 of these things just following each other like a little train.
In a taxi, just like, can you slow down a little bit? We're losing my Yulia.
Yeah, actually, where I could see that working is one of the biggest problems with birds and the electric scooters. No, is that they get left everywhere. So if you think about if there was a follow me mode where you could be one person kind of collecting them all and bringing them back to, if there was like a little station where you could like kind of check them out. Maybe that.
I don't think so.
All the straws have been grasped, everybody.
David, before you go any further, you need to settle a question from one of our faithful viewers, supporters of this podcast.
Oh, sure.
He wants to know, and this is Chris, and he's been in touch with us a couple times on different topics.
Right
on. Can you either confirm or deny that Cowboy Candy was your nickname in college?
Oh!
Cowboy Candy?
We had that on the show. Seth made us some Today Manufacturing podcast branded Cowboy Candy.
Chris, it's his nickname now.
No, Chris, I had a much different nickname that is not appropriate for this podcast platform. But if you'd like to reach out individually,
he seems pretty confident. I think he knows something.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee it wasn't Cowboy Candy. But Chris, if you want to be, you can be my Cowboy Candy.
Oh.
No.
It's nice knowing you, Chris.
Sorry, Chris.
No, thank you for supporting the podcast. And I encourage you to try podcast candy, Cowboy Candy. Tired.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Moving on.
Well, that was a hot start to Final Thoughts. Anna, how have I corrupted your Final Thoughts? And I apologize.
It is so hot in here. I feel like
warm.
Like if I crashed my car and I was forced to build a motorcycle out of it, that I would die.
That's the only way you're going to get out of here. You have to turn that microphone and computer into a unicycle.
That's the only way.
She's riding out. She's going to ride out of here.
You guys, the door.
Yeah, it's way too far.
It's too far. You'll never get there.
We don't have enough water to get there. We don't have enough. Oh, it is warm in here.
Oh.
We all have heat stroke.
On another note, it snowed this week, as you know.
Yes.
And then it's been snowing every day since. And my kids have been so excited. Our backyard is full of snow people. And I think they're turning me into like a snow appreciator because of how cute it is, how much they love it. So now every time it snows, I'm like, you guys.
Yeah.
And how tired they get when they come in from out there.
I know.
Just out.
And then how tired I get, like having to wash and try everything every day.
I was going to say, like, it's great, but then you also realize that you're adding 10 to 15 minutes on the end of going or doing anything.
I know, it's so much work to deal with snow pants, but it's worth it because everyone's having a blast. So enjoying the snow so far. I know it's going to melt this next week probably, but we'll get more. It's Wisconsin. There's always more.
There will always be more. It's been pretty nonstop for like the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. My final thought is just a touch road weary, although I really enjoy getting out in the industry. Kind of seeing the innovation that's happening out in various industries. Also gives you a good reminder of the importance of quality sleep. So just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Whatever you're watching until, 2 a.m. in the morning is not worth it. Go to bed.
Go to bed.
Go to bed. Don't be punchy. And don't call loyal listener Chris your cowboy candy. Jeff, what is your final thought this week?
So you were traveling.
Yep.
Eric, the producer of the podcast, and I were down at the Rockwell Automation Fair. One of the cooler things we did down there is we talked to a lot of the first teams building their robots that were down there.
Yeah.
Some of the local high schools
Nice.
from both Chicago and Wisconsin were down there. And it was just cool talking to them. These kids were super excited at what they'd done, and it was very impressive how articulate they were in expressing what they were about. And we asked them a little bit about their peers' perceptions of manufacturing in the industrial sector. And it was really interesting because while we did get a couple of responses saying the traditional things we hear, it's dirty, it's difficult, you don't want to go into these plants, a lot of them were saying due to their exposure to skills and to FIRST and talking to it with their friends, there was almost an understanding that this was hard. This was difficult. This was very technical in nature, which was interesting because we want to get those things across as a more positive thing. But in some cases, some of those kids who were not, they just thought it'd be too difficult to get involved in these robotics programs.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was like, it was a good challenge sort of thing. Gotcha.
Once they got in the door, it was. You can tell they all embraced it. And it was just a lot of fun listening to them. We're going to cut up those videos and post some stuff to the site. So that'll be great.
You need to be encouraged about whether or not there will be engineering and manufacturing talent in the pipeline, just go to a first challenge.
Yeah.
And you'll be encouraged.
And just how excited these kids were to talk about it. It was a lot of fun. That was definitely a highlight. So we also had a podcast polling question from last week. We asked what would be the best selling point in getting a manufacturer to come to your town. We had some really great responses. This one's from Myron. He said the immediate economic future will see tight money carefully spent. This means the importance of quality product will return as value goes up, hand in hand with necessity. Ultimately, no quality system will allow trained monkeys to produce a more valuable product at lower cost. You must have a robust, trained human infrastructure to sustain an economy. I know heads will explode when I use the term tribal knowledge. Not here. We've been talking about that for a long time. But it's the one piece of capital that the worker owns outright. And that pride of ownership translates into a better and more valuable product. This should be on any pitch for somebody looking to recruit manufacturing to their geography. And again, his response to the point question was quality of workers being the number one thing.
Two things on that. One, the most memorable thing I was ever told by a boss was, you're only here until monkeys can do this, right?
We've all heard that one.
That's where I knew I was in the right place. And then the other was tribal knowledge. In the trade show that I was at, it's an emerging market in the cannabis industry, and they are already trying to engineer out problems with tribal knowledge by having the capacity to collect all the data points on all of their equipment. So that way there isn't kind of that gap that we've seen experienced in manufacturing. And it's very impressive, the innovation happening in that space.
Absolutely. Another response that I really liked here from Joe, also a longtime supporter of the podcast, also said quality of workers, but he was looking at it from a little different perspective. He said all the above are good selling points to bring in new business, but I think in the current state of manufacturing, it's the quality of the workforce available is very important. We were just talking about that in southern Georgia and that Savannah area with all those manufacturers coming in there. So Joe's definitely onto something there. Since there's not enough people to work, it doesn't matter how good the tax breaks are or how close you are to infrastructure, et cetera. These are all benefits, but without a big enough potential pool of people, it would seem less attractive to new business. So a great point by Joe there. And really the overall response, it was kind of close, but really everybody went with quality of workers in terms of the best selling point, as opposed to proximity to infrastructure, lower operating costs, economic growth, or manufacturing friendly environment. So appreciate everybody responding to that one. We've been talking a lot about EV batteries and EV vehicles and the whole future going forward there. So the polling question for this next week is, which is the best route in your opinion in moving forward with materials for EV batteries? Should we mine? Should we develop materials in a lab? Should we look at other energy options like hydrogen or sodium batteries, or as Mr. Dearden referred to, so maybe some stuff with silicone batteries? Or if you've got some other ideas, again, we'll post that to the site. Let us know what you think.
Interesting. Looking forward to see what people have for that other category.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. You could also help us out a lot by sharing it with your friends and colleagues. To email the podcast, you can reach out to any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us live every Thursday at 1:30. For Jeff Franke and Anna Wells, I'm David Cowboy Candy Manty, and this is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.